Today we're looking at two methods to quickly and accurately center your router base. Now before we look at how to center a router base, let's quickly talk about why centering is so important. Centering a router base is important because it ensures that the router bit is exactly center, which means that no matter how you use your router, each cut will be identical and repeatable. For example, if the base was off center, the distance from one side of the base to the bit would be one measurement, and the distance from the other side of the base to the bit would be another. Therefore, if you used one side of the base to reference off the straight edge to make a cut, and then you needed to reposition and use the other side as a reference, your cut will be off. More importantly, router jigs, router bushings, and inlay kits require that the bit be exactly center in order for them to work properly. Bottom line, the accuracy of your projects really depends on the center of your router base being correct. Now that you know a little bit more about why it's important to center your router bit, let's look at the first method. The first method is to use a centering cone, which looks like this. It has a main shaft with a 1/4 inch or 6 millimeter end and a 1/2 inch or 12 millimeter end, which can be used with both a 1/4 inch and 1/2 inch collet sizes. For example, because I have a 1/4 inch collet in my router, I'll simply insert the 1/2 inch shank into the cone and then install the 1/4 inch side into my router. From there, install the base, making sure that the cone is well below the base of the router to start. Next, loosen the screws on the base plate and then lower the base plate slowly into the cone. What will happen is that the cone will force the base to find its center, and you can verify this by looking for gaps around the edge of the cone. If you don't see any gaps between the edge of the cone and the base, everything is good. And as long as you have all the screws loosened up on the base plate, the cone will center itself quite easily. From there, tighten your screws and your base is now centered. Now this does work well, and for most basic routing operations, the cone method works well. However, I personally don't feel 100% confident with this method, especially when it comes to more intricate work like inlays. That's why companies like Whiteside sell an inlay kit that includes a centering pin to center your router before you use the kit. And you can see how precise this pin fits into the router bushing, making this an extremely accurate method for centering. Let's take a closer look at how this method works. The bushing I have here is made by Whiteside, but it is a Porter cable style bushing. There are a lot of other bushing styles out there, for example, like Festool and Bosch, and you can easily tell the difference between a Porter cable style and a Bosch or Festool style. For those of you that don't know, router bushings get installed into the router base plate, and they act as a guide to guide the router through a jig or alongside a straight edge. In the beginning of this video, I showed you an example of the router base acting as the guide, but here the router bushing acts as the guide, which slides along the edge of a jig or a straight edge. Porter cable bushings like these can be used on Porter cable, DeWalt, or other router manufacturers. However, Bosch and Festool only work with their own routers, but they do provide adapters, which we'll be using for today's example. Now, because we already centered our fixed base, let's center our plunge base so that we can use it to make an inlay. In order to get the Whiteside inlay kit to work on our Bosch router, we need to use the Bosch's adapter. Simply install and tighten up the ring on the Porter cable style bushing, and then snap the whole unit into the Bosch router. Again, if you have a Porter cable or DeWalt router, there's no need for an adapter. The bushing will fit perfectly right into the base. Now that the bushing is installed correctly into the Bosch plunge base, it's time to install the centering pin and the 1/4 inch collet. With that done, install the plunge base and loosen the base plate screws. Now carefully and slowly lower the base and align the centering pin so that it fits up through the center of the bushing. And as you can see, because of the tight tolerances between the pin and the bushing, you can achieve a really good center using this method. Now all you have to do is tighten the screws down and you're ready to work. What's nice about this system is it can be used on all routers. Unlike the cone method, for example, where you're going to need one for the Bosch router, and then if you have a DeWalt compact, you'll need another one for that. I do want to remind you that if you're not using router bushings or an inlay kit, you can most likely get away with just using the cone method to center your router base. However, if you like to be more precise like I am and you're planning on using bushings and guides and inlay kits, then the second method is going to be your best option. Let's finish out today's video by looking at what an inlay kit can do outside, of course, centering your router base. Inlay kits are used for inlaying wood shapes into other projects like installing bow ties, for example. Because we already centered our plunge base, all we have to do now is install our inlay router bit and install the bushing collar. With the use of some double-sided tape to hold the pattern down, run the router along the pattern firmly holding the collar tight to the pattern. And then once the edges are done, remove all the remaining material in the middle of the pattern. Then install the pattern on another type of material, remove the collar, and carefully plunge the router down, keeping it tight to the edge of the pattern at all times. With a piece cut out on the table saw, sand the edges round and install the inlay. Once the entire project is sanded down, you can finish your project however you like. As you can see, inlay work is pretty amazing. The sky is the limit. But no matter what you find yourself doing router project wise, the first thing you always need to do is center your router base. Well, I hope this video has been helpful. If it has, please hit the like button, drop me a comment below. It does help our channel grow. If you need specific help, as always, you can reach out to me on Instagram, send me a video or some pictures or a message. Thank you so much for watching today's video. I look forward to seeing you all in the next video.